I booked a last-minute flight to surprise my wife at her camping trip, only to hear her blame me for everything. I've never been the spontaneous type. Ask anyone who knows me. James Harrington plays it safe, follows the rules and rarely strays from routine. That's what made my decision that Thursday afternoon so out of character, almost as if someone else had temporarily hijacked my body. I sat in my office, surrounded by half-finished contracts and spreadsheets that would determine next quarter's projections. The window beside me revealed a perfect spring day that I was missing, trapped behind glass and duty. My coffee had gone cold, forgotten during a conference call that dragged 30 minutes longer than scheduled. When my phone buzzed with Emma's text, a picture of towering pines against a cloudless sky with the caption, "Wish you were here," kind of. Something inside me shifted. It had been weeks since Emma and I had a real conversation that wasn't about bills, schedules, or whose turn it was to call the plumber. Our 5 years of marriage had slowly transformed into a business partnership with occasional moments of affection. She'd go left, I'd go right, and somehow we'd meet in the middle just enough to keep the machine running. The camping trip was her sister Vanessa's idea. "Just us girls," Emma had explained 3 weeks ago, not quite meeting my eyes. "My sisters, my cousins, no husbands, no boyfriends. Just like when we were teenagers." I'd nodded. Said I understood. Why wouldn't I? Emma deserved time away. Her family had always been tight-knit in ways that sometimes felt impenetrable to outsiders. Even after 5 years, I occasionally felt like a visitor rather than a member of the Powell clan. But that text, that casual kind of, struck me as an opening. A tiny crack in a door that had been firmly shut. "Tom." I called to my assistant. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow and Monday. Family emergency." His eyebrows shot up. I'd never used those words before, but he nodded without question. Within the hour, I had booked a last-minute flight to Denver, reserved a rental car, and mapped a 3-hour drive to the White River National Forest, where Emma and her family were camping. The plan formed with surprising ease. I'd arrive after sunset Friday, navigate to their campsite, Emma had shared their location in case of emergencies, and surprise her with the Pinot Noir she loved and the expensive chocolates from that boutique shop she'd mentioned wanting to try. I imagined her face lighting up when she saw me. Maybe she'd laugh that full-bodied laugh I'd fallen in love with, the one I hadn't heard in months. Maybe the cousins and sisters would tease us for being that couple, but secretly find it romantic. Maybe, just maybe, this gesture would remind us both why we'd chosen each other in the first place. As I packed a small overnight bag that evening, a memory surfaced. Emma and I on our third date, stargazing on a blanket in my parents' backyard. How she'd pointed out constellations I'd never noticed before. Her voice soft with wonder at the vastness above us. How she'd turned to me afterward and said, "There's something about looking at the stars that makes everything else seem so small, isn't there?" I wanted that feeling back, the perspective that made our petty disagreements and busy schedules seem insignificant against the backdrop of what really mattered. Friday morning, I left a sticky note on the fridge with a smiley face, our code for "don't worry, everything's fine," and caught my flight. The plane was half empty, and I spent the 3 hours alternating between nervous excitement and second thoughts. What if she was annoyed rather than pleased? What if I was interrupting something important? But the doubts dissolved as I picked up the rental car. A sensible SUV that would handle the forest roads. I stopped at a small liquor store for the wine, then the chocolate shop I'd researched the night before. The young woman behind the counter smiled as she wrapped the truffles in gold paper. "Special occasion?" she asked. "Just surprising my wife," I replied, feeling a rush of anticipation. "Lucky woman," she said, handing me the package. The drive into the mountains cleared my head. Windows down, the scent of pine and earth filled the car as shadows lengthened across the road. I rehearsed what I'd say when I saw Emma, practicing different versions of surprise that wouldn't sound too dorky. None of them seemed right, but I figured the words would come naturally when the moment arrived. The GPS directed me to a Forest Service road that wound higher into the mountains. The rental car's headlights carved a narrow path through darkening woods as twilight faded into night. I checked my phone. No service as expected. I was committed now. Following Emma's pinned location, I found the campground and parked in a small lot where other vehicles were clustered. From here I'd need to walk. I grabbed my backpack, the wine and chocolates, then pulled out my flashlight, heart pounding with anticipation. I started down the trail, careful to keep the beam pointed downward to avoid announcing my arrival too soon. The forest was alive with night sounds: crickets, the occasional rustle of small animals, the soft whisper of wind through pine needles. Above, through breaks in the canopy, stars pricked the darkness with impossible brightness. Emma would be watching those same stars tonight. According to the map, their campsite was about half a mile in. As I got closer, I stopped my flashlight and let my eyes adjust to the darkness. In the distance, I caught the warm flicker of a campfire through the trees. Voices drifted toward me, female voices, punctuated by laughter. I smiled to myself. This was it. In a few minutes I'd walk into that circle of firelight, and Emma would look up with those gray-blue eyes that still made my heart skip. It would be worth the secretly depleted vacation days, the rushed planning, the mild anxiety that had accompanied this impulsive decision. What I couldn't know then, as I carefully picked my way through the underbrush, was that some thresholds, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. That sometimes the truth waits for you in places you least expect it, ready to ambush all your carefully constructed illusions. That night, under a canopy of indifferent stars, I was about to learn exactly what my marriage was made of. And it wasn't love. The campfire cast long, dancing shadows across the clearing as I approached. I could make out 5 figures seated around the flames: Emma, her sisters Vanessa and Chloe, and their cousins Melissa and Rebecca. They were passing around a bottle of tequila, their laughter carrying through the night air. I paused behind a thick stand of pines, suddenly hesitant. There was something intimate about the scene that made me feel like an intruder. Maybe I should announce myself, call out Emma's name rather than simply strolling into their circle. I was about to step forward when Emma's voice, slightly slurred but unmistakable, stopped me cold. "God, I can't believe it's been 5 years already," she said, accepting the bottle from Vanessa. "Sometimes I look at James and think, how much longer do I have to keep this up?" My breath caught in my throat. The wine bottle in my hand suddenly felt heavy. "You've done amazing though," Melissa replied, poking the fire with a stick. "Uncle Richard would be so proud." "Dad always said the long game was worth it," Emma continued, taking a swig of tequila. "Honestly, marrying him was the best way to make Dad pay. He humiliated our family. This was the long game." The words hit me like physical blows. I steadied myself against a tree trunk, afraid my knees might give out. To Emma, Chloe raised her plastic cup, who took one for the team and married the son of the man who destroyed Dad's career. "To the long game," the others echoed, lifting their cups in a toast. "Remember when he fired Dad with no severance, no references?" Vanessa asked, "and then had the nerve to tell everyone Dad was stealing from the company?" "Well, he was stealing," Rebecca said with a snort. "Details?" Vanessa waved dismissively. "The point is, Harrington Sr. destroyed our family's reputation. And now his son is about to invest his inheritance in our family's new venture, without even realizing it's designed to fail." Fresh laughter erupted around the fire. I felt sick, my mind racing back through the years. My father had been CEO of a mid-sized technology firm. He'd died 2 years ago, leaving me a substantial inheritance I hadn't touched yet. Emma had recently been suggesting I invest in her brother's new real estate development company. "He's so cautious with money," Emma was saying now, her voice taking on a mocking tone. I'd never heard before, always with the spreadsheets and projections. "But he trusts me. One more push and he'll sign those papers." And then poof. Chloe made an explosive gesture with her hands. "Bye-bye Harrington inheritance." "To think," Melissa said, "your dad orchestrated this whole thing from the beginning. Making sure you accidentally met James at that charity event. The look on his face when I walked down the aisle." Emma laughed, but there was something hollow in the sound. "He thought I was in love with him. God, sometimes I almost feel bad for him. He's not a horrible person, just boring. Predictable." "Well, predictable is perfect for our purposes," Vanessa pointed out. "And once the money's gone, you can divorce him and we'll all live like queens on a private island somewhere." "I'll drink to that," Emma said, raising the bottle again. I stood frozen, the cheerful gift bag in my hand, now an absurd prop in a play I didn't know I was starring in. 5 years of memories cascaded through my mind, each one now tainted with suspicion. The chance meeting at the fundraiser, her interest in my family's business, the way she'd encouraged me to distance myself from my father's old colleagues who might have recognized her last name. 5 years of waking up next to someone who saw me as nothing more than collateral damage in a vendetta against my father. As they launched into stories about their childhood, I backed away slowly, careful not to snap any twigs underfoot. Once I was far enough, I turned and walked numbly back to the parking lot, the wine and chocolates still clutched in my hand like artifacts from another life. In the car, I placed them carefully on the passenger seat. My hands were steady as I started the engine, but my mind was in chaos. The headlights illuminated the empty road ahead as I drove away from the campsite, away from the life I thought I had. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I just drove, mechanical and precise, following the GPS directions back to civilization. Inside, though, something fundamental had shifted, or perhaps broken entirely. The stars that had seemed so bright and promising on my way in now felt distant and cold, indifferent witnesses to the unraveling of everything I believed was true. The 3-hour drive back to Denver passed in a blur. Radio off, windows up, just the sound of tires on asphalt and my own breathing to keep me company. I checked into an airport hotel just before midnight, a generic room with beige walls and a painting of mountains that looked nothing like the real ones I'd just left behind. I sat on the edge of the bed, still fully dressed, and stared at my reflection in the dark television screen. The man looking back at me seemed like a stranger, someone naive, trusting, easily fooled. 5 years of my life had been a performance, and I'd never suspected a thing. Sleep didn't come that night. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and began a methodical audit of my life with Emma. First, I checked our joint accounts. No unusual withdrawals. But I noticed she'd recently added her brother, Michael, as an authorized user on one of our credit cards. The same brother who was launching the real estate venture she wanted me to invest in. Next, I looked through our tax returns. Last year, there had been a significant charitable donation to a foundation I didn't recognize. A quick search revealed it was run by Emma's uncle, her father's brother. By dawn, I had compiled a document detailing every financial connection between us, every potential vulnerability, every asset she might have access to. The inheritance from my father remained untouched in a separate account, but she'd been laying groundwork to change that. I booked a flight home for that morning, then made 2 calls. The first was to Marcus Webb, my father's longtime attorney and perhaps the only person who might understand the full context of what I'd discovered. James, his voice was gruff with sleep. Everything all right? No, I said simply. But it will be. I need to meet with you Monday morning. It's about Emma and Richard Powell. There was a pause. Powell? As in the CFO your father terminated for embezzlement. The same. His daughter is my wife. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll clear my schedule. The second call was to change the locks at our house. I cited a lost key as the reason, paid the emergency weekend fee, and arranged for it to happen while Emma was still away. On the flight home, I sat by the window watching clouds drift beneath the plane. I thought of my father, stern, principled, sometimes difficult, but unfailingly honest. He'd warned me once that integrity had a price. People will test your boundaries, he'd said. They'll see how far they can push you. Never let them push you into compromising what you know is right. Had he known somehow that I would face this test? Had he suspected the true identity of the woman I was bringing into our family? But no, if he had, he would have told me outright. My father never played games. Unlike Emma's family, who had been playing the longest game of all, I landed and drove home in the rain, puddles reflecting the gray afternoon sky. Our house, my house, looked the same as when I'd left it. The locksmith had come and gone, leaving the new keys in the secured mailbox as arranged. Inside, I moved with quiet efficiency. I packed 3 suitcases: clothes, personal items, important documents, and a few photographs. None that included Emma. I took my laptop, my father's watch, and the small box of mementos from my parents that I kept in my office. Everything else could stay. Everything else was contaminated. I texted Emma once. Flight delayed due to weather. Hope you're having fun. She replied almost immediately. Missing you. Be home Monday afternoon. X. The casualness of her lie twisted something inside me. How many I love yous had been tactical moves? How many intimate moments had been coldly calculated steps in her family's revenge? I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter beside a note that said simply, "I know everything. Don't contact me. Lawyers will be in touch." By nightfall, I was checked into an extended stay hotel downtown. I sat at the small desk and made lists, people to contact, accounts to freeze, steps to take. My mind worked with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, as if a fog had lifted. I called Tom, my assistant, and asked him to reschedule my meetings for the next 2 weeks. "Family emergency?" he asked, concerned. "No," I replied. "Family solution." Over the weekend, I reached out to a divorce attorney Marcus recommended, someone known for handling high-profile separations with discretion and ruthless efficiency. I provided her with the documentation I'd compiled, explaining the situation without emotion. "They planned this for years," she said, reviewing the evidence. "What do you want out of this, Mr. Harrington?" I thought about it for a moment. "Justice," I answered. "Not revenge. I just want what's fair." She nodded approvingly. "Then let's proceed carefully. Don't confront her yet. Let's get everything in order first." In those quiet hotel nights, I didn't rage or weep. I planned. I prepared. I protected what was mine. And somewhere along the way, I realized something fundamental. Emma had never known me at all. She'd underestimated not just my intelligence, but my resilience. That was her first mistake. It wouldn't be her last. 3 weeks after leaving Emma, I met with Victor Reeves for lunch at his private club downtown. Victor had been my father's mentor decades ago, and had stayed in touch with our family over the years. At 78, he still commanded respect in every room he entered, his mind as sharp as ever, despite his semi-retirement. "I always thought there was something off about her," Victor said, carefully cutting his steak. "Couldn't put my finger on it, but she reminded me of someone." "Her father," I replied quietly. Victor nodded. "Richard Powell was charming too. Right up until the moment your father caught him siphoning company funds." I pushed my barely touched food around my plate. Emma mocked my business ideas. "You know," called them pipe dreams. Said I should focus on realistic investments, like her brother's real estate scheme. Victor put down his fork, eyes suddenly alert. "What business ideas?" I hesitated. For years I'd kept my concept for a specialized cybersecurity service close to my chest. Even Emma had only heard the vaguest outlines. The program I'd been quietly developing could identify financial fraud patterns before traditional systems caught them. Ironically inspired by the embezzlement case that had brought down Richard Powell. "Show me," Victor said simply. That afternoon, in his wood-paneled office, I walked him through my business plan, the algorithm I'd developed, the market research I'd compiled. By evening he'd agreed to be my first investor, and connect me with his network of tech industry contacts. "Your father would be proud," he said as we shook hands. "You've taken his legacy and built something new from it." Those words became my fuel over the next months. I poured everything into launching Sentinel Financial Security, working 18-hour days, recruiting top talent, refining my algorithm until it could detect subtle patterns human auditors often missed. Emma tried everything to reach me. Calls, texts, even a tearful appearance at Marcus's office, claiming there had been a terrible misunderstanding. "She says you overheard a joke at the campsite," Marcus reported. "That it was all dark humor about family history, not an actual plan." I laughed without humor. "And the investment scheme? The foundation donations? Her brother on our credit card?" She had explanations for all of it. None particularly convincing. While Emma scrambled to rewrite history, the divorce proceedings advanced methodically. I offered a settlement more generous than my attorney recommended. Fair, but protective of my assets and new company. Emma fought it, demanding half of everything, including my inheritance and shares in my startup. The judge was unimpressed by her arguments, especially after we presented evidence of her brother's fraudulent business proposal. 6 months in, Sentinel landed its first major client, a regional banking chain that had suffered a series of sophisticated fraud attempts. Our system identified the pattern and tracked it to its source within days, saving them millions. More clients followed, each success building our reputation. I moved into a minimalist apartment overlooking the city park, decorated only with what I needed and nothing that reminded me of the past. For the first time in years, I felt light, unburdened. Meanwhile, Emma's family was unraveling. Without my investment, her brother's real estate venture collapsed under the weight of hidden debts and questionable practices. An anonymous tip, not from me, led to an investigation into the family's charitable foundation, revealing it as little more than a tax shelter. Then came the news I hadn't anticipated. Richard Powell, Emma's father, was under federal investigation for financial crimes dating back a decade. Apparently, my father's firing him hadn't ended his fraudulent activities, it had just driven them underground. Victor called me when the story broke. "Did you know about this?" "No," I answered honestly. "But I'm not surprised." By month 18, Sentinel had expanded to 3 cities, with a team of 40 specialists, and a client list that included 2 Fortune 500 companies. I had moved from surviving to thriving. From reaction to creation, the business publications that had once profiled my father now turned their attention to me and the innovative approach we were bringing to financial security. At a tech conference in Boston, I found myself seated at the keynote dinner, next to the CEO of Meridian Global, one of the largest financial institutions in the country. "I've heard impressive things about your company," she said. "We should talk." The next day we signed a preliminary agreement that would put Sentinel's system in every Meridian branch worldwide, a deal that would triple our company's value overnight. That evening, alone in my hotel room, I allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. Not because I had proven Emma wrong, or because her family was facing the consequences of their actions, but because I had finally stepped fully into my own identity, separate from both my father's legacy and Emma's betrayal. The man who had stood frozen in the forest, clutching wine and chocolates as his world collapsed, was gone. In his place was someone stronger, someone who understood that the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. My phone buzzed with a news alert: Powell family assets frozen in widening financial fraud investigation. I turned off my phone without reading further. Their story was no longer part of mine. 2 years after that night in the forest, Sentinel Financial Security occupied the entire 23rd floor of a gleaming downtown tower. My office faced east, offering a panoramic view of the city. Waking up each morning, I had developed a routine of arriving early, using the quiet hours before my team arrived to center myself and plan the day. That rainy Tuesday in April seemed like any other, until Diane, my executive assistant, appeared in my doorway with an unusual expression somewhere between concern and curiosity. "There's someone here to see you," she said carefully. "She doesn't have an appointment." Something in her tone made me look up from my monitor. "Who is it?" "Emma Harrington." Diane paused. "Or I suppose it's Emma Powell again now." The name hung in the air between us. Our divorce had been finalized 14 months ago, and I hadn't seen or spoken to Emma since signing the final papers. "She says it's important," Diane added when I didn't respond. "She's been waiting in reception for almost an hour." I considered having Diane send her away. There was nothing left for us to discuss. No loose ends that required tying up. The settlement was complete, the assets divided. The legal chapter was closed. And yet, I found myself nodding. "Give me 5 minutes, then send her in." After Diane left, I stood and walked to the window. Rain traced jagged patterns down the glass, distorting the city below. I thought about the man I had become in these past 2 years, focused, successful, respected. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, careful not to carry forward any debris from the collapse of my marriage. What could Emma possibly want now? When the door opened again, I turned slowly. She stood in the doorway, a ghost from another life. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner. The designer clothes and perfect makeup had been replaced by jeans, a simple sweater, and shadows under her eyes. "James," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, returning to my own seat. Professional distance seemed the safest approach. "Your office is impressive," she said, glancing around at the minimalist design. "The whole company is." "I read about your contract with Meridian Global. Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What can I do for you, Emma?" She flinched slightly at my directness, then squared her shoulders. "We need to talk," she said. "I made mistakes. I was angry. I didn't mean all of it." I waited, watching her search for words. The Emma I had known always had the perfect thing to say, each sentence calculated for maximum effect. This hesitant woman seemed like a stranger. My family is, she paused, swallowing hard. Things have fallen apart. Dad's facing federal charges. Michael might be indicted too. The foundation's been shut down. Everything's gone. I nodded once, acknowledging the information without offering sympathy. The business news had covered the Powell family's collapse in detail. The fraud charges, the frozen assets, the mounting legal bills. I've had a lot of time to think, she continued, her eyes fixed on her hands. About what you heard that night. About what we did. What I did. She looked up, tears brimming. It didn't start out as a lie, James. I was supposed to get close to you, yes. But over time, I started to care. Really care. When? I asked, the first hint of emotion cracking through my calm. When did you start to really care, Emma? Before or after you convinced me to give your uncle's foundation $20,000? Before or after you added your brother to our credit card? Before or after you spent 5 years of my life playing a part in your family's revenge fantasy? She flinched as if I'd struck her. I deserved that, she whispered. But I'm not here for money, if that's what you're thinking. I've gotten a job at a real estate office. Entry level. I'm staying at my cousin's place until I can afford my own. Why are you here then? Because I need you to know that it wasn't all a lie. There were real moments between us. I know you don't believe that. You're right, I don't. But it's true, she continued, undeterred. And because I've lost everything else, I at least wanted to look you in the eye and say I'm sorry. For whatever that's worth. I studied her face, searching for the manipulation, the calculated performance. Instead, I saw exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine regret. Did it matter? Did her remorse, real or performed, change anything about what had happened? I opened my desk drawer and removed a manila envelope I'd prepared months ago, never certain if I'd have the opportunity to use it. You didn't just hurt me, I said calmly. You used me. And now that karma's come full circle, you want out of the deal you made with your own bitterness. I slid the envelope across the desk. These are the divorce papers I signed a year ago. I've highlighted the non-disclosure agreement we both signed. It prevents me from discussing your family's fraud with the authorities. Her eyes widened slightly. I've honored that agreement, I continued, despite multiple inquiries from federal investigators. That was my choice, not because I owe you or your family anything, but because I'm not interested in participating in anyone's destruction, even yours. She reached for the envelope with trembling fingers. I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say, I replied, standing to signal the end of our meeting. I wish you well, Emma. I truly do, but this chapter of my life is closed. And if I want to try to make amends, to show you over time that I've changed, I shook my head once. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. This is one of them. I walked to the door and held it open. She rose slowly, clutching the envelope to her chest. Goodbye, Emma, I said quietly. She paused beside me, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of perfume I once knew so well. For an instant I saw a flash of the woman I thought I had married, or perhaps just the woman I had wanted her to be. Goodbye, James, she whispered, and then she was gone. I watched her walk through the reception area and disappear into the elevator. Then I turned and walked back into my office, closing the door on the past once more. 3 years after Emma walked out of my office, I sit on the deck of my coastal home, watching waves roll against the shore as the sun begins its descent into the horizon. The house is modern yet warm, glass and wood and stone arranged to frame the ever-changing seascape before me. It's exactly what I wanted, spacious enough for comfort, modest enough to feel like home. The company continues to thrive under my leadership. We've expanded to international markets, developed new security protocols that have become industry standards, and launched a foundation that provides cybersecurity education to underserved communities. The work remains challenging and fulfilling, though I've learned to delegate more, to trust my team with the vision I once carried alone. I come here on weekends, leaving the city and its constant motion behind. Sometimes colleagues join me for strategy retreats, sometimes friends visit for lazy Sundays of good food and better conversation. Most often, though, I'm alone and no longer lonely in that solitude. There's a peace in building a life that belongs entirely to yourself. In choosing your own furniture, your own routines, your own path forward. In knowing that every decision, every success, every failure is authentically yours. I've dated occasionally, careful relationships with women who know my story and respect my boundaries. Nothing has stuck yet, but I'm not in a hurry. The desperate need to belong to someone else, to complete some imagined missing piece, has faded like an old photograph left in the sun. Victor visits monthly, his health more fragile now, but his mind still razor sharp. We sit on this same deck, discussing business strategies and world drama, and the mystery novels we both enjoy. He never mentions Emma directly, but occasionally references what he calls the unpleasant business with the Powells, as if it were a minor footnote rather than the upheaval that redirected the course of my life. Perhaps, in the grand timeline of a life, that's all it is. A sharp turn in the road that ultimately led somewhere better than the original destination. News of the Powell family reaches me occasionally, filtered through business contacts or mutual acquaintances who don't realize the connection. Richard Powell was convicted of financial fraud and tax evasion, sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. His health failed shortly after his incarceration began. He died of a heart attack in the prison medical facility. I sent no condolences, but I took no pleasure in his death either. Michael Powell accepted a plea deal, testifying against his father in exchange for a reduced sentence. He served 18 months and emerged to find his reputation in tatters, his business contacts vanished, his assets depleted by legal fees. As for Emma, I've heard she moved back to her hometown after her father's death. The real estate position didn't last too many clients. Recognized her name from the scandal. She lives with her mother now in the family home, the only property they didn't seize. According to someone who ran into Vanessa at an alumni event, Emma works as an administrative assistant at a local community college, keeps to herself, rarely socializes. I wonder sometimes if she thinks of me, if she regrets the path her family chose. Not because I want her suffering. I don't, but because remorse is the first step toward becoming someone better than who you were. I hope for her sake that she's found a way forward that doesn't involve using people as pawns in games of vengeance. My phone buzzes with a text from Diana, my current executive assistant, Singapore team. Reports successful implementation, client extremely satisfied. Details Monday. I smile, sending back a quick acknowledgement. Another milestone reached, another promise kept. The sun touches the water now, painting it gold and crimson. I think about the night I stood in that forest, hearing my life dismantled by casual cruelty around a campfire. How I'd felt hollow then, emptied of everything I thought was true. How impossible it had seemed that I would ever feel whole again. Yet here I sit, rebuilt, stronger at the broken places, as the saying goes. I reach for the glass of wine beside me, a Pinot Noir, ironically the same varietal I'd brought to surprise Emma that night. The taste is rich and complex, neither bitter nor sweet but something more nuanced, like life itself. A memory surfaces, Emma's voice around that campfire, casual and cutting. Honestly, marrying him was the best way to make Dad pay. They had underestimated me then, the quiet, cautious man they thought would be an easy mark. They hadn't seen the resilience beneath the restraint, the strength behind the stillness. I raise my glass to the sunset in a solitary toast. Not to triumph over those who sought to destroy me, but to the unexpected gift their betrayal ultimately offered. The chance to discover who I truly am when everything familiar is stripped away. I don't hate Emma. I don't hate any of them. Hatred requires investment in another's story, and I've chosen to write my own. Funny how life works. I booked a last-minute flight intending to save my marriage, only to find it was already lost. Instead, I saved myself. And that has made all the difference.